All right, now we get the opportunity to hear from one of our associate regional directors, Tanita Maddox, who's going to share with you about the work we're doing across our region and specifically how we're working with Gen Z kids. So with that, let's bring up Tanita.
All right, think back to when you were a teenager, huh? Maybe you were listening to Beatles, Beach Boys, Bono, Boys to Men, yeah, Bush, all these places. I have a picture of me when I was in high school. Here we go. This is 1996, on the way to the last football game of the season, the state football game championship. That's me in the middle, right? Voted most spirited, the senior class. So there we go. There you go. There's the proof. December of 1996 at the bottom. Remember when dates were on the bottom of your printed photos? There you go. That's a sign of my age also. Well, I realize that one of the common mistakes that we make is we think about when we were a teenager, when we were in high school or middle school and college, and we think, oh, it's the same for everyone that follows me. Everyone that's ever been an adolescent has the same experience, right? I've been there. I was 15 once. I've had that experience. And in some ways, those things are true. Like, there's things that will always be true about adolescence, like you're moving from childhood to adulthood. We've got growing and changing bodies. We learn all sorts of new hygiene, like, hey, you probably should wear, something for the smell. At some point, when adolescence is when we learn that. But I think this group, we feel that there's something very different about this group of adolescents that's in our midst now. There's something a little bit intangible that we know that there's this kind of mountain in between kids and adults. We feel like maybe we're speaking a different language. We feel like there's something that's in the way of them understanding what faith is or who Jesus is. And what's interesting is that, here's what the research says, right? 73% of adolescents want to turn to older generations for help, for advice. In tough times, this generation of adolescents wants to talk to adults. At the same time, 71% feel like they don't understand me. So we have this group of adolescents that desperately wants to go to older adults to talk to them about real things. And at the same time, they're caught with this, but what if they don't understand me? What if they don't get me? What if they don't see me? And so they're caught in this place of wanting to talk to adults and yet being afraid to at the same time. And one of the things I get to do is I get to stand in front of adolescents and I ask them, what are you hearing about yourself? When you hear the media, when you hear the news, you hear adults talk, what kind of things do you hear about yourself? And I'm sure you can probably guess, there might be some things running through your mind right now, but I get to sit in front of adolescents. I have high school students who will sit in front of me and say, I hear that they think that I'm lazy, that I'm entitled, that I'm weak, that I won't make it, that I'm fragile. And I always have to stop and go, man, what would it be like to want to go to someone for help? And yet you hear the message of what they think of you, or all these other words. But at the same time, they're desperate to be heard. And this summer, I got the chance to speak at Young Life Summer Camp, and I was walking with a sophomore student through the camp, and she found out what I studied. She said, what do you do? I said, I study Generation Z. That's her generation. And she stopped and she said to me, thank you. Someone has to tell the grown-ups what's happening to us. Such a highly self-aware group of kids. Now, who is Generation Z? Who am I talking about? Who are these adolescents? Well, these are folks that are born between the mid to late 90s to 2013, 2015, somewhere around there. They are our middle school, high school, college students, and now our young professionals. They're the largest generation in the United States. They make about a quarter of our population, and they're also the most diverse. It's the first time in the history of the United States we've had a generation that is mostly non-white. They grow up in a post-Christian cultural worldview, which means they don't have cultural references to matters of faith. It's likely that they don't really know when Jesus walked the earth, and they just don't have a lot of ties to that. And they're also not just the Christian faith. They're most likely to have no religious affiliation in their home. And so what do? Is we start to take this position of, what did Jesus do? What did Jesus do when he interacted with people? So in Mark 5, we look, and we see that there's a synagogue ruler, Jairus, who is a very, very sick daughter. And while this crowd is around Jesus, he goes to find Jesus and says, please come with me. Please come lay your hands on my daughter. She's very sick. And so Jesus starts to go with him, and this huge crowd is with him because they want to see what's going to happen next. And we know that in that crowd was a woman who'd been suffering, hemorrhaging, bleeding for 12 years, had given all her money up to doctors, was in a worse place than where she started. And in her desperation in that crowd thought, if I can just touch his cloak, maybe I'll be healed. And so she does, and immediately she feels the bleeding stop in her body. And Jesus also feels what happens in that moment, and he turns around and says, who touched my clothes in this huge crowd? Who touched my clothes? She, knowing what happened, came, fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told him the whole truth. Some translations say she told him her whole story. You see, Jesus had urgent things to do. He was on his way to take care of something that actually had life or death consequences. He was moving and grooving to get there. And to stop and listen meant slowing down, meant putting those urgent things on pause, meant saying, oh, okay, I'm going this way, I gotta stop though, and I need to pay attention to you and listen to your whole story. So I have to first off say thank you. This is our pause. You have busy things, you got things to do, there's things waiting for you back home and in your computer and waiting for you tomorrow and on Monday and all these things. And we can run towards those things, whatever needing to stop. And tonight, we're getting to stop. And we're going to sit and talk about Generation Z and kids and listen to their story. So when we listen to the story of kids, what we'll realize is that there are mountains between them and the gospel, and we can recognize what those mountains are and what the gospel means to those kids. One thing we have a mountain of mental health issues. So this generation, right, has been identified as being highly anxious, highly depressed, very, very high rates of suicide. And so this little chart here, if you see that stark incline that goes up, that incline follows the trend of when this generation had access to smartphones and social media access. And you can see, boom, it shoots off the charts. Suicide, self-poisoning, depressive episodes, and depressive symptoms. We're gonna throw anxiety in here, we can throw a lot of things, but we know that this generation struggles with more mental health issues than any previous generation that has existed. We have a mountain of mental health issues. We have a mountain of noise that our kids are facing this day. This is a little funny kind of comparison I put as like, I was a teenager in the 90s, woo, to compare to a teenager today and the noise that they have in their life. We grew up with one landline in our house. There was a certain time of day no one called because mom and dad was gonna yell at them. You know that, like, why are you calling so late? So it was quiet at night. It was quiet in the morning because you didn't call before school and wake up people. There was built-in quiet. You were only reachable a certain time of the day if they got you on the phone. These kids are reachable 24 hours a day by all people at all times. There is never a time that they're expected to be unavailable. They have noise in their head. They wake up with noise. What's the first thing you think that kids today do when they wake up in the morning? But reach for their phone, right? What do you think the last thing is most kids see before they go to bed is their phone? In fact, you can talk to a number of high school students who sleep with their phone underneath their pillow. They wake up to alerts, they see noise, they hear noise. They can stream, watch, listen to whatever they want to, whenever they want to. This is long from the days where I had a Discman, you know? You held like this because it would skip, and you were limited to the discs that you owned, which was like 5 in my little sleeve that went above my steering wheel. That was it, right? You got bored of it, you were done. They can listen to something all the time, everywhere, whenever they want to. They can actually watch their friends hang out without them in real time. They can be in their room, they can see ex-boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, best friends, doing things, being places without them, versus just coming to school on Monday and finding out what happened over the weekend. My embarrassing moments, they're just stories that people maybe tell sometimes. They probably have been now washed away with age, but their embarrassing moments, they live in a world where there's always a camera on them, recording them, posting them, shared. So your embarrassing moment can be instantly shared with hundreds of people before you even sit down in your chair from that moment that you've had. They live in a place where they're always watched. The noise never stops. And I talked to a counselor that said, think about it like this. Think about always opening tabs, like your computer tabs. They're always opening tabs in their brain, but because there's no silence and there's no space, they never close them. She goes, that's where anxiety comes from. Open, 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 distract, 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 and never having time to quiet yourself. But this is the one that gets me too. I grew up with fire drills. My kindergartner just came home a couple weeks ago because they had their first active shooter drill. That's the world our kids are growing up with, under a mountain of noise. They also have a mountain of destructive messages coming their way. So technology, I think we know now, technology is designed to make us addicted to it and create this fear of missing out all the times. So our adolescents are growing up with a constant message all the time that says, you are always doing the wrong thing with your time. Wherever you are right now, there's always something better you could be doing. There's something better you should be paying attention to. So you probably should have your phone faced up wherever you are because something better might happen in that moment. They hear contradictory messages of like, you are beautiful the way you are, but here's this face filter you can put on for your camera so you look like how you're supposed to. Your body, you should be proud of where it is, but here's a bunch of images of actually how we want you to look. So we're walking with those two images all the time, these counter messages going on, and in the middle of that, they're growing up in an environment of cancel culture that says if you say the wrong thing, or even if you ask the wrong question, we will yell at you, we will publicly shame you, and we will embarrass you. Imagine that task of an adolescent trying to figure out who you are, and any wrong move means you will be publicly shamed. And in their social media and media, they're constantly getting the message, you are not enough to be loved or to be valuable. This is the business of social media. This is the business of media that is targeted to adolescents to constantly say, you are not enough, nor will you ever be enough to be loved or to be valuable. This is the mountain of things that are existing between kids and adults, between kids and hearing the gospel. And so when we stop and we listen to their whole story, we say, tell me what it's like to be you, and don't let me assume that because I was 16 once, I know what it means to be 16 today. I get to share with you on behalf of my Gen Z friends, but also something in their own words. One of our Young Life leaders is a teacher and just put this prompt on her classroom wall that said, dear adults, I wish you knew / cared about ... and let her students write. And she shared with some of the letters, and they're so beautiful, but I want to share one with you up here on the screen. Dear adults, I really just wish you were more careful about how you treat us. Yes, I'm young and dumb, but that doesn't make me any less capable. In fact, know that I'm stressed out too. I'm working 24/7 as well as personal relationships slowly falling apart. As I try more and more to cope with what's going on, I'm sleep deprived and my only happiness comes from temporary fixes only for it to bite me later on. Stop writing us off as lazy. Freaking help us. Children right now are going through hell. Right now, and some adults refuse to listen. I think there's a lot of things in that letter. I think we see self-awareness of, man, I'm looking for life, and everything I try is failing. In fact, everything I try is even leaving me in a worse place. But one of the things I love is that letter is an invitation. It's an invitation to us, saying, please don't leave me alone. Please come for me. Please fight for me. Please help me. Because on my own, I'm not making it. And so when I get a chance to sit in front of adults like this, who care about our middle school and high school students, and our college students, and our young professionals, and go, yes, but what do I do? What can I do? And I want to say, hey, here's 3 things that you can do. 1, if you know anyone between the ages of 11 and 24, ask them these 2 questions. What are you hearing about yourself? That same question I asked, what are you hearing about yourself? Because we get the chance to actually correct that. You know what? You're more than that. I mean, if we're young life leaders, if we're the ones that are going to change the next generation with the message of the gospel, if we're going to ones that walk into kids' lives and tell them who they are in Christ, we got to do better than telling kids that they're lazy and fragile and weak and that they're not going to make it. We get to go in and tell them who God designed them to be. And the second question I'd say is ask this, going, what do you wish adults understood about what it's like to be you? What do you want us to know about what it's like to be you? You would be unbelievably surprised that this generation is dying for people to ask and will share with anybody who will listen. I was simply just working in Chick-fil-A, studying and writing, and the Chick-fil-A person that delivered my food said, what are you working on? And I said, I study Gen Z. And he said, really? And he sat and talked with me for 10 minutes because he just wanted to talk to someone who understood. He's like, what do you know about me? Tell me what you know. And we talked, and he just loved this idea that anyone would want to hear about what's it like to be an adolescent. And more than that, cared and was a cheerleader in that moment. So ask questions and listen, and we can start to move away that mountain of noise. The second thing, as I said, bless and encourage. After Jesus heard this woman's whole story, after he heard the whole story, the next word he said might be the most important word in this passage, which he said to her, daughter. We have a group of kids, again, living in this cancel culture that says you're never going to be enough, you're not enough to be loved, you're not enough to be valuable. And they'll walk around going, but will you accept me for who I am? Will you accept me? Do I have to pretend I'm someone else? Do I have to be someone else? Do I have to look different? Or will you accept me for who I am? And when Jesus uses that word daughter, he says, I've heard your whole story. And I'm going to use a word that says, you are valuable. You are dear to me. I want to love you and keep you and protect you and hold you. It's not just ma'am. It's not just nice lady. He uses a word that says, you belong with me. And when we get to bless our folks, we can walk around and I promise, you can do this to the bagger at the grocery store. You can do it to a child, a grandkid, a student, do a stranger or not. Just walk up and go, man, you know what? I was at a place where they talked about Gen Z. Can I just tell you something? I think you're amazing that you're standing here today. I could never do what you do. It takes more strength for you to walk out the door and be a high school student than I've ever had to understand. We say that and you'll see like, oh my goodness, someone sees me. I do sometimes. Sometimes I do because I'm weird and I'm a young life leader. I do that sometimes. And I'll just like, man, you know what? I'm so proud to know high school students. I think you're amazing. And they may look like I'm weird, but they need to hear from more adults that say, I think you're amazing. I think you're incredible. I could never do what you do. So we bless them. You can even send a text message now. My feelings won't be hurt. If you send a text message to someone right now and just said, man, I had no idea. You are stronger and more courageous than I ever have said you are. And the third thing I say is go into that field of young adults or send someone. This is the more isolated group of young adults we've ever seen in our life, right? We've seen at our own school where I do Young Life, in-person enrollment has dropped, sports enrollment has dropped, clubs enrollment has dropped. This was already a trend going on where kids don't have to leave their bedroom to be entertained, to talk to their friends. They don't have to go anywhere, and so we have more and more isolated kids. And the crazy thing is that data says the more time they spend on their social media and on screens, the less happy that they are, and yet they still go back to that place again. And so we need more people who are willing to say, I'm going to fight through the noise, and I'm going to fight through the mental health issues, and I'm going to fight through all the destructive messages that are coming your way because you're worth sending someone to. You're worth it for me to go or to send someone who's going to figure out how to speak your language, how to listen to you, and how to share Christ with you, because leaving you as you are is not an option. It's not an option. It's how we lose a whole generation. How do we help You ask and you listen, you bless and you encourage, and you go there or you send someone who will. Because if and when Jesus gets a hold of this generation, they will reflect the image of God in ways that we will never have done before. They are truth seekers. They will fight for truth and they will stand for truth. And if we give them truth, they will hold on to it and they will share it. They are positioned to change the world in a different way than any previous generation has. And they know it. They are globally connected. They can make things happen like this through the internet, through social media, through their relationships. They know they have a voice. They know they can change the world. And if we equip them with Christ, they will be unstoppable, not just in our neighborhood, but globally. They can impact the next set of generation. They have a deep care for creation. Let's not forget that that's the first job that was given to Adam, was take care of my creation, and they are bringing that back with them. They will reflect their care for the Lord's creation in them, and of course, they care about justice, and they believe that all people deserve dignity. And that's the same God we serve, who says every single person bears the image of God, and a God who does not stand for injustice. With Jesus in their hands, they will be an unstoppable force. But we gotta go in after them, because left to their own, they will be crushed by the mountain that's on top of them. When we give them Jesus, it is their faith that we will get to watch move mountains in ways that we will never have imagined could be moved before. Please, my friends, love this next generation the way that we will go in and we will fight for them like we've never had to fight before. I just want to say thank you for letting me get to be a representation on behalf of our 12 and 13 and 15 and 20 and 22-year-olds. It's an honor to get to stand with you and to talk to you about them and for them and with them. So before I bring up Jeff, our regional director, who's going to share a second, I just have to stop and pray, because, how do you not after this, right? I'm just going to pray. Lord, we pray for the next generation. Would you equip us to reach them? Would you make a way for that, Lord? And would you move mountains so that you would get a hold of this next generation of kids, this next generation of young adults, and change the world for your kingdom? Amen.